40% discount on selling the credits. We spoke with Mr. Hayes, and the Public Preserve Advisory Committee unanimously agrees that we recommend to the board that they allow Mr. Hayes to go to a discount of 40% if necessary in order to sell fire impact fees. We are cognizant of the fact that the sales of these fees have been very slow, and at the rate we're going, we're not even going to make the deadline, which is 2025. And we feel that it's incumbent upon us to sell them more quickly and get the funds in-house, even if we have to do so at a 40% discount.
Thank you. Motion to approve.
Sure.
Gary, please.
Yes.
Motion second. Questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Please continue.
If there are any other questions on the written report, I'd be happy to answer them.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. The next item is 5, the consent agenda, which consists of the minutes of April 7th, the authorization for WP and LPA to provide legal services, amending the engineer's report and the stormwater ponds management report. Are there items for board members who would like to discuss before we approve the consent agenda?
I think we should certainly have Mr. Piers discuss his portion, which is in there publicly.
I would agree with that. Any others?
Forgive me, just give me a second here. Oh, yeah, well, again, with this ponds report, I'd like to kind of, especially since we have a new board member, let's kind of go through part of that as well.
Okay. Would you speak into your microphone just a little?
Hello. I would like to pull the discussion by Mr. Piers, and I'd also like to pull the stormwater ponds report so that Mr. Banks can go through that with us and see if he has any input.
And I have a question on B, just one question.
Okay. We're going to discuss item 5B, the authorization recommended by Mr. Piers. Can you help us get started on that?
Yeah,
please?
briefly, the current arrangement agreement with the district is, my rate is for my service is $150 an hour maximum. For any other associate, up to $125 an hour. And then costs for any copying, other services associated, direct costs with this particular project. In this, I just want to have the clarity that was authorized to engage in this to provide whatever support is needed in legal advice and opinions as necessary to assist Danny in the amended engineer's report and the board adopting an amended engineer's report in order to allow the expanded list of capital projects to be constructed in Pelican Preserve out of the bond proceeds.
Okay.
I have one question. The bond counsel on this deal, who exactly is that?
Dave Lapidus, and he's with Squires, Patton, and Boggs. And he sent in his proposal too late, he got sidetracked. And David's and that should be on the next board meeting's agenda. David's very familiar with Gateway as well as the bond issues for Gateway. And it used to be Squire, Sanders, and Dempsey, and now it's Squires, Patton, and Boggs, and they've been bond counsel for years.
Squire is a very well-known name in the bond counsel business.
Yes, sir.
Nationwide. Mr. Boggs, however, is he of counsel? Or
Mr. Lapidus, I believe he's of counsel.
can he hold the entire firm? Is he representing the entire firm even though he's of counsel?
That's my understanding, and I will confirm that and I'll have that in the engagement letter.
Thank you.
When it comes before the board.
Okay. A question I have is if you take a look on page 27, the 3 different projects that are there that are looking for approval. Okay? Phil, the safety committee / Pelican Preserve Preserve Advisory Committee, Villa Capri, and et cetera. Are there any things that you wanted to inform us about that might need amendments or changes, such as markings or crosswalks or things?
Frankly, I'm not aware of any.
Gary, I think this Villa Capri is now called Via Donna. I don't,
Just want to be, any of these places where golf carts are crossing, et cetera, and some of the risks and dangers, just wanted to be sure that something didn't just suddenly slide through.
And the process would be that Danny would, Tetra Tech would prepare an amended engineer's report draft with, based upon the input we have today, provide that to the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee for their review and recommendation. And then that report with review and recommendations and comments from the Pelican Preserve Advisory Committee would come before the board.
Good, just
So we
wanted,
get another shot.
Oh, absolutely.
just wanted to make sure that
Yes,
was
sir.
clear. Okay,
It's a good clarification.
okay.
this resolution, though, will authorize the, I was gonna say continuation, and in a way that's correct, of this, project, which the engineers, manage for us in conjunction with the legal folks.
Yeah, it would basically be reallocation of the funding for other projects and modify the projects that can be created, constructed, utilizing the remaining bond proceeds.
Right. Everybody okay?
I had one question, that was just, your fees, are they gonna be paid for out of the bond fund?
Generally, they are,
Okay.
that's your,
That was my question.
as opposed to the general fund or opposed to the Pelican Reserve operating fund, yes.
Okay.
I think we've exhausted that one, then let's, look at the, stormwater management report. Gary, do you want to,
Yeah, let's,
invite us to a particular page?
why don't we start with page 33? And again, unless anybody else wants to start with page 32. And this is open for everybody. All right, on page 33, just a series, as we go through this, a series of questions such as Lake 124, water level low, clarity good, new erosion issue due to a sprinkler at 12019. 12019 what? Hello?
Yes,
Lake 124.
I see that. As
Due to
far,
sprinkler 12019 where? Anywhere Lane,
I'd have to look at the lake number. Is it just one street around there? And-
Championship Circle.
okay. And if that's the case, and we have erosion going, and our budget coming up for lake bank erosion in the near future is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of how many millions of dollars? My question becomes, again, this thing about communication. What did we do to communicate with the applicable person or persons to get that amended and changed? And that's gonna be kind of my series of questions throughout here, such as Lake 125. Aerator compressor is out. Is it still out? Has it been repaired? Then we go to
One of
Lake
the feds.
84. There is an old wood stake with barbed wire wrapped around it, which serves no purpose, and this is also mentioned in another portion of a report. This should be removed for safety. That seems to make an awful lot of sense, as Mr. Banks said about kids and that type of stuff. So what's been done?
The report was on April 20th, and,
Okay, so it's
They're
today's
working
May
on it.
5th.
yeah,
What's been done?
I haven't followed up
Yeah.
with Al yet.
report,
So
we
Lake
can
Eight-
do
so-
the same with this report like we do the community facilities report and hold it till, a day or two before the meeting so that we can get an update. It's just how soon do you want us to get it to you?
Well, Well,
this
if
was
we-
in the packet, but,
We can go at this one of two ways, either every time and every month that we get this report, and I'm gonna keep asking the same thing when we've got these safety issues and items and things that are costing the public money, somebody should have an answer to every one of these things to say that there's been something that's been done in a positive manner,
okay, that's fair.
period.
We could do a matrix, like we're doing on the other one.
Sure.
Next one, I wanna bring an updated matrix.
Mhm.
So they see really the same thing with this.
Yeah, and what I would recommend is, if we're looking at these, it might be helpful to have an action underneath the actual lake itself, so you can see if there's an issue called out, here's the action resolution.
Correct.
Instead of at the end, I think there was some actions called out in a summary, but I think it'll be easier for us to call those out
Without a
as
doubt.
part of the section.
Sure. Not a doubt. So, I mean, I've been rather consistent on this, and I will continue to be.
And you
And-
kinda have
And a
to
time frame
partially-
too, the date of the action and the resolution date, so we know when
Without a
things are
doubt.
out of control.
Sure.
You kinda have it laid out that way on page, what is this, 92,
Right, kiddo. But-
38, I'm sorry, 38. But you just need to
Exactly.
have the whole thing with a task and a action, and whether it's completed or not.
But I think
Sure.
part of it is the timing,
Mhm.
is this is being prepared by an ST staff member. So they
That-
prepare the report, and then it's being vetted, and staff hasn't had an opportunity to really respond and provide it. I think the action that may be in here was probably from the prior month
Mhm.
finding. So we want to bring to you, next time we do the maintenance inspection report, we're going to add a couple of columns as far as how staff has prioritized it, what the action is, what the status is, and we can do the same thing for this one.
Yep.
But
And create a matrix for that.
Based upon that, though, I'm gonna come back and say, if again, we consistently get this thing that, and the argument that back before has been the fact that the Severn Trent staff person does it on X date, and it's always, everybody uses the excuse that it's too close to the time of the meeting, then it would seem rather apparent that you need to reschedule the time of the inspection. Or this should be something that we get at the second meeting, which if we get this information at the second meeting means that there shouldn't really be any reason whatsoever for any kind of, oh, I haven't looked at it yet. There's more than 2 weeks of time to be able to handle all those
Sure.
issues.
Or a supplemental report shortly before the meeting that shows the action that's been
Something.
taken.
But
It's,
there's got to be some kind of change to get change.
Also, we might request, I don't know if you deem it appropriate, but it'd be nice to have a staff member, whether it's Molly or Bill, that if we wanted to ask specific questions, they might have the answer. Just have them available when this report is presented to us.
And for example, too, just, I'm beating a dead horse because I've been beating this for months. Lake 90 and 91, they
But-
talk
wait,
about.
Wait, please,
I'm-
please go back and tell us again what page you're on now. We moved to
I haven't
38.
really moved a whole heck of a lot. I'm on 34.
Okay. Well, I went to 38.
That's all right.
I
I
can get
wanted you to
back
go
to
there.
34 easily enough.
Back
Thank you
to
very
30
much.
Lake 90 and 91, where it talks about trash coming out of the dumpster. This would seem the dumpster that was associated with the soccer fields. Wouldn't it kind of make sense? It talks about the installation of another dumpster, but has anybody communicated with the soccer league to try to have them help us to try to make sure that we don't have that type of situation?
Yes, we have implemented some new procedures at the soccer complex. We are trying to, we've got new receptacles, we got an extra dumpster. We've been trying to give more attention to the restrooms and addressing some of the league's concerns. We have also created a schedule where the pool attendants are helping out, so now they don't only just open the gate, they actually go in and they perform an inspection. Each time they go in and inspect the facility, they're recording it on a report, we're recording it in a binder, and now we have also created a log for accountability, so everybody, including the leagues, and I haven't vetted it to them yet because we're perfecting it to make sure that the logs are being used. But when they go in and clean the facilities and do their inspections and do what they're supposed to be doing, everyone will be held accountable by signing into the log.
So this is all hard copy, not digital?
you mean exactly?
Well, it would have to be hard copy from the field, because unless they.
Not necessarily. This is something else we've been discussing. Think about this one. We've got people that are out there that are doing all this hard copy type stuff, and it's been that way for the almost 8 years that I've been here. Why then can't some of those key staff people be walking around with an iPad?
Yes, sir, we're also working on that. We've put iPads in the budget, for next year. We're also looking at some inspection software. It's, something that South Florida Water Management District uses. Elle has looked at it. It looks pretty simple.
Right.
And I wanna examine it to see how we can, use it in other areas. Because with our new GIS software that we are spending a pretty large investment on, that's one of the goals of the mapping software, is for us to have the ability for our field crew to walk around with an iPad and be able to do the locates and know exactly where all the utilities are and the irrigation and whatnot. So we are looking at different ways to utilize the iPads, and we do have some in the budget.
So Stephen, you're hearing this? Didn't mean to wake you.
So I have a question. With the GIS software and the apps that you're looking at on the iPads, are those just are they just mobile apps, so they could be leveraged both on iPad and on mobile devices? So if you had an iPhone, you could literally pull it up on your iPhone and or iPad?
I think what staff has looked at so far is really just, probably just an inspection software. I wanna get involved with them and really do an assessment of what our needs are, because we also have a work order system that I would also like to, and there's probably some software available where we can actually, it's PC with the mobile app.
So it's either web-based or it's.
That's what I would like to find,
Okay.
is if we get something like that and make an investment, something that's, multiple areas of the staff can utilize, so we can monitor activity and have that instant feedback and the timing of how long it's taking
Yeah.
us to do
That's
this.
what I would look
So,
at, is either something that's a web-based application where you can access it through a website on your
Anywhere.
mobile device or iPad, or an app, a supported app, which again, same purpose. You could upload the app on multiple devices.
So after all these, I think, but somebody had mentioned it to me, but it was gonna be my last question. What's the turnaround time from the time the Severn Trent person does this to the time that they transmit the report? In your hands.
Did it on the 20th, within 3 days.
Okay, because this was done on April 20th, so that
Mhm.
means that you had it April 23rd. Today's May 5th.
Yeah, and I'm not sure exactly when staff
Yeah.
got it. I know this.
And it could all be taken care of. That's why a follow-up report, we can implement
Okay,
that right away.
so then a
Last week,
follow-up
the week
report would
before, I
mean
was
that
on
by
vacation.
next meeting, you'll
Yeah.
have a follow-up report. Is that true?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That being the case, if that was April 20th, then our next meeting is May 19th. Can you give us the follow-up report at that time on these
We
items?
can do that.
Good.
You satisfied?
Yeah.
Other questions?
No, good.
All right, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items 5A through C.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, thank you. For item 6, discussion items, Tetra Tech, task authorizations for meter. Danny, please.
For the record, Danny Nelson with Tetra Tech District Engineer. This is probably way too far behind where it should be. When we lost Yvonne, this probably should have been an item to come forward, as the meter program ended up falling in the hands of of Cindy, who really was not the person to be running this, and we've since lost Cindy. So this was an item that really should have been, come to the board to have somebody manage and run it to get this project to the end. So essentially what this task authorization does is it allows us to do what we've actually started doing already, and that's move this project to the end. So if you have any questions.
I do.
Please proceed.
What is the reason that we need to engage our engineers to do this? Why isn't this something, if Cindy was doing it before, not that she loved doing it, and I don't blame her, why isn't it possible for us to do this in a more economically wise way to get this done?
The problem is that you have a conflict of interest with staff who are involved directly, and those who are qualified, in my opinion, to do it on the staff side are Severn Trent, and they're a direct conflict. Cindy should have never been put in the position. You know, she's a financial person and not a project management person, and frankly, I think that's why we lost Cindy.
Okay. Now,
Excuse me,
go ahead.
and you can blame me for this, because I'm the one who recognized when Cindy was gone, we were in a world of hurt, and we didn't have anybody else, and I needed quick help and access on this, and I asked Danny to help bail us out.
Okay, well,
That's it.
I got two more questions.
Oh, please.
Okay. Then, my next question is, based upon that, why couldn't somebody like Terry Hanlon be handling this? No, I want the public to know.
Or I can also jump in if you want. I mean,
Sure.
I think from a contract management perspective, based upon the expertise that Tetra Tech has in managing in construction inspection services they provide for other large-scale utility projects, I think it requires more than an operational person. I think it requires them interacting with Four-Line as a contractor to tell Four-Line, no, this is the way you need to go, and that you, Four-Line, need to get your subs in line. I think, so I support the concept of having Tetra Tech being that oversight for
Good.
this.
I wanted the public to hear
I
that.
think it's a critical and important facet. The skill and expertise, and already the way Danny and Tyler have jumped into it, I think it's been a great help.
Good. Now, here's my third question. Why is the public paying this? Why isn't Severn Trent paying it, back charging it?
Well, your contract is with Line, so I don't,
And
you don't have a.
Four-Line and whomever.
We're holding money back from Foreign Line, and we are not there yet at the end of the day as to how that will all be reconciled.
Yeah, we're not patsies on this thing by any means.
Well, I didn't think, I just wanted, there's some people that are here that represent the people we serve, so. Okay.
Can't
I had a
guarantee
question.
what
Oh, I'm
happens
sorry.
if there's money retained.
Let Pam, go down the line.
Danny, would I be overstepping to ask you to tell us a little bit about what you guys have to do, what the process is that you have to do?
In an ideal world, it would be simply managing the contract. Our problem in this case is you have 95% of the meters installed, but it's there's less than 150 meters remaining, and they're the problem meters. They're meters that we're still working to find, meters that that Four-Line and/or the installer is claiming a potential change order. There are issues with meters that were installed improperly and not registered, so there's just a lot of issues. So we're trying to tackle it, one step at a time. The first is getting the meters installed, and then it's addressing, the issues that are at hand. So it's outside the realm of a typical project that you might just say, go forth and we'll do our, regular status updates. There's a lot of hand-holding that unfortunately has to be involved, because the project made it to a certain point and has just been very stagnant. And by very stagnant, I'm meaning that they're installing, 2 to 10 meters a week, and that's not a dig at the installer or anybody else. It's just the project has to proceed, and the only way it can is if we have to is for us to step in and get on top of it.
Okay, so at this time, what kind of time frame are we talking about in completion?
Well, the contract as it sits allows them through the end of November, I believe it's somewhere in November. That being said, the contract also requires that they make reasonable progress. And when you look at the work that was done to date, up until, let's say, November of last year, and the work that's been done from November till now, there has not been reasonable progress. So I can't tell you exactly a date, but Tyler has jumped in and he's managing it, and he has asked for a schedule and for all the issues to be addressed. So we do have a schedule. I just don't know. Tyler's listening, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what that is, but we're not talking about the November timeframe. We're talking about within the next couple of months, because it's affecting your billing. I mean, Mary is now having to go out there for just, instead of 6,000 meters, she's going out there for just 100, 125, and it's just creating a little bit of logistical issues.
Okay, do you think that we'll have more information maybe by next meeting?
I think at the next meeting, three of the things that Tyler asked for. One was a schedule, a legitimate, realistic schedule. He has that. The second was a list of what they're believing are change orders, so that we can review those and determine whether or not we believe and can recommend them as a change order item. The third is a list of all of the outstanding meters that they claim they can't find. So Tyler personally went out there with Fortiline and walked every one that they say they could not find, and we were down to like 4 or 5 that Mary was verifying. So a lot of that has already taken place. So yes, I believe at the next meeting we can give you an update.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Actually, he answered the question in what Pam had asked. I was looking for a time frame, so.
Thank you. Members of the board, we need a.
Hey, Bill, I just have one
Got another
question.
board
So,
I forgot about that.
I'm in Pam's seat now. So I understand the reason for Tetra Tech to jump in with project and quality oversight. Makes sense to have expertise. But what I do want to see, and I'm hoping that we'll see this at the next schedule, is how many remaining meters. Based on that, what is our expected end date, whether that's going to hit November or exceed. And really the one thing that I'm looking for is, what leverage do you have now in order to push, continue to push our vendor to complete either on time or as close to as possible? And is there anything that you're going to need from the district to help you drive the enhanced schedule, or at least whatever the schedule is?
And I think I'll be able to answer the latter part of that better in 2 weeks, once we're able to vet a lot of the issues out. What I will say is we have a very good and capable person on our side. The bulldog is Tyler Wainwright, and he's very much a bulldog. So he will be the hammer, and he loves doing that. So. And he's already asked for all of these items, so I think we can come back in 2 weeks and we'll know better. Like I said, there are issues that they believe maybe potential change orders. Like, let's say typically how you'd have a meter is you have a box, you have the meter, you have connections on both ends. Some of them might have been straight piped together. There was nothing wrong with it. It's just different from how they might normally see it. They're calling that a change order. We're saying it was an existing condition. So we've got to vet through all of those and know. As far as holding their feet to the fire, we've got to tread a little bit lightly, because their contract ends in November, and we've got to tread on the side of the production rate that they had previously versus the production rate we had now, and lean on that side of the language as opposed to the actual end date, and prod them along. I think probably a little more gently than not. They want to finish. I think that the vendor wants to finish and get out of there. That's not really an issue. We just have the logistical part of how do we get there.
Yeah, and I guess at some point, based on your recommendation, we have to determine at what point they might be in breach. Tony?
Yeah, well, and once again, that's the whole issue about whether or not we want to declare them in breach, strict liquidated damages, and what then happens there afterwards. And so it's one of those issues. Do they then decide to walk away and risk all that, or stay in and get prodded, like Andy was saying?
And part of it is, if we were just talking meters, that would be one thing. But we're talking about smart meters, so it's one thing to go buy a meter and install that. It's another. It's outside of my expertise, at least, and maybe it's simpler than this. But to make sure that it's properly, reading and that data is being transmitted, is where we need their input. So, but we'll come back with an update.
Great.
So Tyler's listening.
Danny, don't forget to mention that we have asked Fortiline for a complete audit of the system once they're finished.
Yes, and that was something that, part of what we will be doing is this, and that has already been discussed, and one of the things we will be recommending is that a full audit of every single meter that was installed, that a full audit be performed, and that Fortline pay for that audit. And those discussions have already taken place, and I believe Fortline is in support of doing that.
Everybody okay now?
Yep.
I need a motion to approve this, task authorization, labeled fiscal year 16-4. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0, Mr. Manager.
Who made the motion and the second?
Margaret made the motion and Pam second. The next discussion item is the proposed fiscal year 17 general fund budget, which was sent to us. And if you printed it out, you have it
I've got a few
with you
copies
and.
coming.
Okay.
You're on page 50. Cal, is that the deal?
That's what I'm getting to.
Oh, yes, that's on here, but it isn't, oh, that's under 7C, Gary.
So, is it his intro page 50?
No.
This thing about number of voters and all that stuff?
No, that's just a notification that is required.
Okay.
Flash drive.
So you're at
I do.
7D. Thank you.
Here.
You're not gonna be able to just find it. What do you need?
Okay.
You get
A lot of stuff.
All you got together, it's amazing.
An email
Yeah.
to. Here.
Well, sure.
Diane's helping me make it sometimes.
No.
Oh, you gotta find it?
Yeah.
You have yours in your hand?
Yeah.
Gary, do you have one, or do you need?
I don't have one with me.
Updated? You got an updated one too.
So do you shrink down the video?
Oh, he wants music from there?
Pretty well good.
I just wanted to put it on the screen.
Okay. Cause there are
Okay.
cords here that plug into
Does it say that?
the spot.
Is this the one April 29?
Box.
Is that the one?
That's 70. That's,
There's more coming.
Yeah. Someone else need a hard copy?
Is it dated April 29th, Cal? Is that the one, or?
Thank you, sir.
okay, we have everything that we need?
Yeah, we do. Let's go.
All right. Yes, sir.
One
Uh,
more.
No, we got one. Tony, do you have one? Do you need one?
He's fine. We're working
Okay,
together.
and we have it up on the screen.
Oh, you, good. Wait a minute. Okay. At the last meeting, we adopted informally a schedule of the fiscal 17 budget that we were going to be studying, and today is the general fund operating only, not capital. And Mr. Bloom will start us through it, if you will, please.
Sure. Stephen Bloom, Severn Trent. I'm going to start kind of with an overview and then just talk about some of the key changes, the bigger numbers that change in the budget. And then we can, either go line by line or talk about anything that you want to. Included in this package, just kind of as an FYI, is the full staffing plan for the entire district, not just the general fund. And I'll keep that plan in every one of our packages, just kind of for reference information. Also, I've included the preliminary assessment chart. Again, I'll keep including that as we go, as things change. And then I included a summary page on the allocation of shared costs. Just kind of real briefly, there's 2 departments that get shared across the general fund, Pelican Preserve and the enterprise fund. So it's helpful to have a consolidated schedule to look at some of those costs so you can see how they're being allocated. Now, kind of looking at the general fund only, and again, looking at from a an overview standpoint, the current version you have, and again, this is preliminary, has a 10.86% increase over the 2016 budget. Now, most of that is the result of putting in the principal and interest payments for the potential loan with the state revolving loan. That number is about $320,000. So that represents a quite a large number. If we were to take that principal and interest payment out, as well as the differential that I put in for the fixed asset reserve, which I'll cover in a second, really the only increase in the general fund budget would be about $26,000. So I know when you see 10.86%, that's a big number, but when you pull out the effect of the loan, it's really only $26,000. And we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. One of the things that I did do is I reduced the fixed asset reserve transfer from your current year budget. It's currently about $255,000. I reduced it to about a little bit over 100,000. Excuse me, 150,000. It's reduced to 105,000 to kind of offset a little bit of the principal and interest payments. You know, that's why it's only about $26,000 increase. Kind of going through some of the other big key budget changes. Again, obviously the principal and interest payments is the big one. The transfer to fixed asset reserve, that line is really to cover future projects that are not, you know, related to lake maintenance. That line item can be reduced, obviously, if we want to get that number down. But in the preliminary budget, I wanted to at least put some number in there so you could see how the assessments would look with something in there. On the contractual services for landscaping, this will be year 2 of the Mainscape contract. So there is a reduction in the pricing that is included in your budget. There's 2 separate line items that we'll get to that have a reduction from the first year, so that was helpful. Irrigation repairs and replacements went up. That's just based on, you know, kind of a current run rate and what's expected for next year. And we can kind of take a look at what that means to the budget. The plant replacement program, that was reduced. That's really more of a timing thing in terms of when the architectural plans are expected to be completed versus when you'll be able to start spending on that line. Number 6, I put the second portion of the architectural contract into the budget. I think it's about $30-some thousand. It's a little bit of an increase from your current budget. And that represents, like I said, the second part of what they're going to be doing for you next year. Lake and wetland maintenance, both of those lines increased. That's basically to cover potential turnover costs from WCI. Some of that money we had in the budget or have in the budget this year and hasn't been required. Next year we've got some more money in there, and we can kind of talk about what that means as well. And finally, the propane and natural gas, that budget was reduced. That's, you know, to cover this potential savings on the conversion to the natural gas. So those are kind of the big numbers, and obviously there's many other lines that we can talk about. We did want to mention with the staffing plan, right now there is a 3% wage increase in there. Obviously that's something that the board's decision will have to talk about, but again, just as a starting point, we put 3% in there. There's no new positions in there right now. And with all of that, kind of getting down to the assessment numbers, with the increase in the general fund, that would represent about a 10.29% increase year to year in assessments, or $38.23 per unit. And it's really important to know that we do not have the final ERU total count. That won't be available to us until the first week in June. So basically what we do is at the beginning of this process, we ask for kind of a preliminary report. They give us what they have or what they can give us. It's not, you know, certified yet until June. So that is kind of top level as to what you have for the general fund right now. And then, yeah, starting on page 1 here is where you can see the line by line, starting with revenue and working through the different departments. with that, if you want to open to questions or,
Yeah, just keep going slowly through. I've marked a few things. Hopefully
Okay.
other members have or will stop you when we get.
Okay,
when we
sure.
get to.
I'll start going through some of these line items. And yeah, please stop me if you have any questions or concerns.
What
Cal-
page, okay, you're on like.
Right there, yeah.
two.
It's really just page 1. First up there is special assessments. You can see there the increase. There's nothing fancy about that. That number will adjust as we make decisions related to the expenditures. And then there's a discount that's associated with it. That's just a calculation that we put in. It assumes everyone pays early. And then, as you can see, when you look at the projected, there's about a $10,000 difference between what we budgeted from year to year versus what people actually take. The next couple lines here, we have not changed the budget. We looked at the projections and they were pretty close to what we thought the budget was going to be, so we kept them level for this first version. We did increase miscellaneous revenue a little bit. Right now, so far in the actuals, it's about $7,000. And again, this miscellaneous, you can really never count on too much, but we do want to put a little bit in there based on your track record. 5,000 is a pretty conservative number.
And what is that, what's that from? What's
It's all kinds of different things, miscellaneous things that come in. There's just really no category to it.
Okay.
Depends. Interest income is an interesting one. Even though you're really not going to make your projected number for this year, I kept it level. And the thought process is that if you do go through with the state revolving loan, then the funds that we've been kind of unsure of whether or not you'll need right away for lakes, we'll be able to do more investing. So that should at least drive your interest income up to the $15,000
Is there
for
an
next year.
arbitrage problem there?
No. No. Okay, so that's kind of revenue.
Hey, can I ask you one question on revenue? So, so the revenue goes into the general fund, but is there a, with the dog park, the RV park, is that called out in like its own GL, or how do you, or is it just, does it all just get allocated to the general fund?
There's categories.
Yeah, there's
Okay.
departments, separate departments that we are tracked for that. But it is, for the general fund, it all can be it's put into one bucket, I think is what you're asking.
Yeah, I am, yeah, thank you.
If there was a lot more bigger departments, then we probably track it a little bit differently. Maybe, let's say you're doing a lot more with the dog park, or you got some more construction or something happening, then you'd probably want to reserve a little bit more if more money was coming in.
Yep.
But right now, you don't really have enough money to cover it. Okay, the next department is is the first of the shared costs. And again, these are really more of general invoices for the district, and it's kind of allocated, like I said, across the different funds. First up here, you have the supervisor fees. Nothing's really going to change there. The management and accounting services, that's the Severn Trent contract. No change there. Engineering fees and attorney fees, overall, I left them pretty level for the first version. In actuality, both of those are running better, are favorable to budget right now, which is a good thing. But for the first version, I kind of left it flat because you really just don't know what you're going to need with some of these services year to year. I didn't want you guys to be short if for some reason something else comes up. These two lines might be something as we talk more to staff, that if we need to, we can probably trim a little bit from those two lines. Auditing fees, that's your audit, that's an allocated portion of the entire audit for the district. All of the insurances at this stage, I have an increase in there built in. We won't know for a little bit where your rates will be, so I always program in an increase just in case, so that, again, that you don't fall short. Legal advertising, that's kind of self-explaining there. There is an annual filing fee, it's about $75. and then audio-video recording, which is kind of some of the miscellaneous type expenses. And that covers first department. Okay, operational admin services. Cal, I think you went a little bit
Too far?
just a little bit too far. Right there, okay. Again, this first section of this, you can see, is all the payroll costs. And again, salaries and taxes and all of these benefits are laid out in the staffing plan per position, per fund. So you can track it. It's a little bit harder to track it here line by line because you don't know what the position's in there. But on the staffing plan, it shows per position, per fund, and even, you know, what's been allocated across the board, so you can kind of see.
Can you stop for just 1 second?
Sure.
I remember when I was new to the board and we started through this, I was more than a little confused, even though I did budgeting for almost 40 years. And I want to invite you to go to page 8 for just a second for our new, basically for our new board member. So you'll get a better idea of the fact that there's a lot of allocating going on in here, and the general fund is only one part of this thing.
Correct.
And if you look at the top, Doug, especially on page 8 at the top on the right,
Yep,
you'll see that the general fund, which is what we're talking about, is Fund 01.
okay.
Then we go across and we have, well, I'm not sure what Chief General Fund P&R, what do you?
Parks and Recs,
Or Parks and Rec, okay.
then
Anyway, it goes through,
swimming.
we have, General Fund 02 is Pelican Preserve, 04 is, what,
Stony Brook,
and 400 is the Enterprise Fund. And the Enterprise Fund is where all of the utility and the water, a big, big part of our operation resides. And we're not talking about that yet here.
Okay.
That will come later, in 2 weeks or so.
Okay.
And I just wanted to move forward on that so you have a better mental picture of what you're looking at
Okay,
today.
great, I appreciate that.
And it's also worth noting on page 5, as I mentioned it a couple times, you see it something very similar in terms of how the allocation works. Right there, Cal. The left side, if you go up a little bit more, yeah, the left side shows you the trend analysis, starting with 13, 14, 15, and then projected. And then the right side there starts with the 2017 budgeted amount for each of these line items. And then these are the 2 departments that we just talked about. And as you can see, then they then get spread out across 3 funds. And like I said, it's easier sometimes, for example, when you look at the management services contract, which is a Severn Trent contract, that's $225,000. And then you can see the pieces of how it gets allocated out. And that's kind of what we did with staff, is we went down line by line and looked at it. And then I mentioned engineering fees and attorney fees. You can see here the projected for 16, and again, it is still projected, is about 66,000. And we've got budgeted 80,000 across the 3 funds. So that means that as we go through here, you know, and then, you know, we're talking months go by, there's some room there to trim. And then when you trim the 80,000, then each of the 3 funds will obviously get that savings built into it. And again, I'm going to keep, you know, some of these core schedules will remain in the budget as we work through some of the other funds so that we can refer to it. Okay,
What page are we going back to?
that would be back to page 1.
1?
1 of this package anyways. So again, this is the operational admin services department. Again, it is allocated across those funds. And then the first 4 or 5 lines are all related to payroll, including workers' comp. There's a professional fees line item in there that's really more generic. They really haven't even spent on it so far this year. We kept a little bit in there for next year. Then you have some of the normal operational type line items here: telephone, cell phone, postage, rentals. Really not a whole lot of change that we made year to year. You can see there is a little bit just in terms of trying to minimize some of these accounts. And again, as we get more history and trend analysis, it's a little bit easier to kind of predict what those line items would look like. And then some of these we did increase, like office supplies. I believe that's where, and operating supplies, you know, for like the iPads and different things.
Stephen, with the building maintenance and repairs, we've discussed a few times over the last month or two the repairs that are needed to the outside of this building,
Mhm.
which are certainly going to be more than what's there. Is there another allocation for, in any of these other budgets, for that maintenance or those maintenance and repair items?
The total allocated across is 12,500 for building maintenance and repairs.
Okay.
Projected this year is not even 9,000, so it really will depend on how much and whether or not we need to put a little bit extra into that. But there is extra in there now. I don't know if it's sufficient because I'd need to see, you know, kind of what the estimate would be in terms of what we're talking about, just painting, or are we talking about, you know, a little bit more than that. And then once you get to a certain level, then you start discussing whether or not it really should come out of your capital
Correct.
fund. And I know in your budget this year, we have, in the utility side, we have some money in there for the expansion, but I don't know that we'll ever really get to that, but.
Well, I think that's the second part. The first part that we're looking at right now in the condition of the building externally is something that certainly needs to be taken care of because it only keeps getting worse. Okay.
Okay, but I'm gonna put that as a note to, you know, we'll have another discussion about that.
We're doing general fund capital next, are we not?
Yes,
And when we do that, I presume we're going to have at least a short discussion about the future of this building?
that would be part, yes, yes. As it relates to the general fund, I mean, you can have that discussion either way. I mean, the utility fund and the general fund for this particular, the discussion would be the same, but you can have it whichever one.
Yeah, but to be clear,
I know, you're
Okay.
absolutely right, I know,
Okay.
I agree.
I mean,
With this,
and
the
it-
outside of this building needs some work.
Yep, I'm aware.
But a few months ago, we had some preliminary discussion about expanding the building.
Right.
And we made no final determination because it's really affects the budget in a very big
Right.
way. And so we're gonna talk about it in 2 weeks
Okay.
when we do the capital.
Makes sense.
May we proceed? Everybody okay? Please proceed.
Okay, so, Cal, if you can kind of continue to the next page. Again, none of these line items are really, you know, big, significant dollar amounts that we're talking about. I do want to note that, and again, this is only an allocated portion, but as it relates to training and education, we did put the additional amount that we discussed, the savings from the insurance, a reduction for health and all that, into training for the budget for next year. So there's the 10,000, I think it was $10,000 is in your budget right now to do the additional training.
And doesn't it say two?
It's spread out over other funds.
yeah,
Allocated.
that's the thing where, Doug, you gotta look, it's not just here, and that's why I was asking Steve.
What page
what's the
number was
total
that?
number?
That was page 5.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
So they're broken out as it goes by.
Right.
Yeah, and if you can help me as we go through, especially the administrative and staff costs, I know that we've got a couple positions that are open. I think what I've heard is the cost to fill those for the right individual may be higher than what we were previously paying. And April, I don't know if you're at that point yet where we're able to look at what the proposed budget is and say, okay, are we where we need to be from a staff perspective?
Mhm.
So I don't know how much forecasting we've done for that
Right,
piece.
I can tell you, so I don't cut you off, that April has already had us increase the utility director position.
Okay.
You know, when we had this discussion, I believe that was the only
Okay.
position we increased.
Okay. And we'll finalize this, when is the,
Well, this is gonna be ongoing for the next 3 months.
okay,
to
so we'll have
speak.
time to go back and revise
Yeah, we
as
have-
other
we have
work
to-
happens.
We have to
Okay.
agree to a high water mark for
Mhm.
this budget on.
It's the June,
15th.
yeah,
Yep,
the
okay.
first meeting in
First
June.
meeting in June.
The public,
We continue tweaking
Yep, okay,
over
all right.
a couple of months.
but the training, though we've thrown a number in there,
And
Yes.
importantly, have we decided what training goes along with that number, or are we just throwing a number at the wall?
Right now, it's throwing the
That's the
number
question.
into the wall, yes. Yeah, that would come later.
And that just gives us a messy wall, so I'm
Right.
just saying.
Well, no, and again,
Not only if it sticks.
well, yeah, and again, the idea is.
No, there's residue that's there.
Sure. The staff will be able to work through that part of it.
So are you, I think what you're saying is we probably need April to work with staff to identify what training certifications are needed to bridge the gap, and let's figure out what that amount is, because 10 may be sufficient or it may not even come close when
Plus
we're looking
additional
at.
training equipment that could be there in the form of DVDs, videos, yada, 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 for ongoing types of things, et cetera, and also with the new types of meters that we have and the transmitting type stuff to bring them to a higher level.
We're on schedule to, we wanna vet our new evaluation form to you probably next week. And also, I'm trying to get that implemented for a July 1st implementation. So right around somewhere in June, we're gonna be sitting down with staff and we're gonna have to come up with those training ideas and what the immediate needs are.
So you're asking the question, so what certifications training do you feel like you need in order to your role? Okay.
But there also could be, from a legal standpoint, are there certain things, Mr. Legal Expert type?
Well, that's what we're working with April, and make, with regards to what the staff needs, which also might be required, for example, if we do get the AED program, that's part of the cost. We're implementing that also.
Exactly.
I'm not following a legal issue on training, but I didn't follow.
If there's certain certifications that a staff member have in order to facilitate their job, or to keep us
ADA stuff.
in regulations or
Correct.
within
Oh,
any
from a
guidelines.
risk
Correct.
liability.
Yeah, yeah.
May we continue?
Oh, yeah.
Please, Steve.
Okay,
compilation.
I want you to pay particular attention to the last line on page 2, though, before you go
On this
too
page,
far
is
ahead.
it in more than-
sure, yes. Okay, so that gets us to landscape services, the department.
Okay.
Your favorite.
Yeah, let's go.
Oh, okay. And again, this is the first department where there is no allocations. So you're not, when you're talking about these particular line items, you're not talking about other funds anymore. So first up is, again, like most of these departments, you have your payroll line items. And then the real significant one starts on the contractual services. And that's where you can see your first decrease in terms of the year 2 of the contract. And so the number goes down to $649,000.
Those are actuals.
And where are we at with the current contract? That may be unfair to ask you, but where are we at with the current contract as far as when would it be? How long does it last?
Oh, another year and a half?
Yeah, this would be, year 2 would be, year 1 is March 16.
Okay,
So you got 2 more years after that.
okay. And do we still have a display periodically in our supervisor, in our agenda book and for the public as to when these various contracts expire?
Yeah, that
Yes.
goes on every other meeting.
Just throwing things down to the end. That's all.
Thanks, Gary, I appreciate it.
Open your bag.
I should have, Pam, maybe we should switch seats, so I'll sit over by Gary.
Okay.
Steve, where is the other part of that landscaping contract?
It's under Parks and Recs. It's a little bit smaller amount in terms of the reduction, but 103,000. And then there's a third piece to that, which is in Stony Brook, which you guys don't have yet, but it has some savings there too. Okay, tree trimming is next up. Actually, staff requested an increase on this particular line based on the expectations of next year. So that number did go up a little bit to 25,000. And then irrigation repairs and replacements, this particular one actually has 15,000 in it. The expectation being, if you notice, your projection is very high. So the expectation is staff plans to do some significant repairs for the rest of this year, and then is keeping next year flat.
Is there a reason why next year is flat? The system is how old, per se, other than new construction? How old is the system? I mean, is it, like me, geriatric and getting to the point that, you know, you need things replaced or et cetera? And if that's the case, then rather than crisis management, do we want to be proactive, bless you, whoever, about this type of thing?
My first comment would be, if you're talking about a significant type of plan, that would go into your capital.
Okay.
If you're talking like every year, I think we're gonna need to tear up or do that, and again, I'm just talking about from a fiscal
No, I
standpoint,
think we-
then you would put money in there.
Opened a good chapter there.
This would just be the ongoing repair and replacements type of a thing that would be separate
All
than
right,
kind of
so-
redoing or, you know.
So my question then becomes, obviously, is it not time for us to start planning that?
You will see that presented to you on the capital side.
So there's an assessment, an irrigation assessment that has been done or is being?
We're having conversations now with Tyler and trying to figure out, trying to get a status on what we already know about the irrigation system. But it definitely is band-aided, like you had suggested. It's very old, and we've got 12 satellites, and of those 12, none of them are working.
Okay.
And what's the impact to the Gateway Boulevard, the road construction? Have we seen any increase in any damage or replacement or?
The new pathways are being a continual issue because we put the new pathways in and the irrigation was disturbed. And so we're finding, you know, some sprinkler heads are undermining the pathways. And so we're having to address the repairs, trying to address, up in the commercial areas, the sprinklers are actually someone else's responsibility. So we've been struggling with that, and it's something that we're gonna have to address because I think that's gonna be an ongoing issue. I believe we're going to be in responsible for those walkways. So I think we're gonna have to allow for that. It's gonna be an ongoing issue of dealing with that.
But I was thinking more of infrastructure, okay? Not just the,
On the capital side, we're bringing something
Correct.
to you for that.
okay. All right, we'll see how that's next meeting? Is that what you just said?
Yes, I think that's our plan.
Yes, capital for the general fund is next meeting.
Okay, good.
Okay. Plant replacement program, as I mentioned earlier, that number was reduced. And again, that is really just a timing issue. I think if.
What do you
if-
mean by that? I'm not sure that I,
The idea being that if it's gonna take X amount of time for the architectural design plans and everything to be completed, that staff wouldn't even have the time to spend on this line item next year.
this isn't the annuals replacement program, per se?
No. No,
Where is that at, Stephen?
I think what I'm hearing that is in your contractual services landscaping. I'd have to go back to that contract, but I believe as a part of that, they do those annuals.
Is this more break fix if there's a damaged
I-
plant? we
that, and I
replace
think
them
this
as
was also
opposed to
for
the flowers
enhancements.
in the median, I think is what Gary's talking about.
Can we?
Yes, that was for enhancement.
Enhancements related to, related to the architectural design.
Oh, that's solely related to the architectural result?
That was the idea. But I will make a note to double check,
Could we
'cause
break that out into two different things, by
And
any
Wouldn't that,
chance?
would that not be capital?
for plants, no, you really don't have
Yeah.
a useful life much for plants.
Not typically. We hadn't, anyway.
we haven't gotten.
One is essentially this other project that you're talking about, but we still have ongoing types of things where we have the annuals that tend to die and the corner curbs and all that other stuff.
Yeah, so we've been struggling a little bit, and at the last meeting, we talked about moving forward and going ahead and planting some plants out there to help some of the dead areas where we've cut down trees and stuff.
Right.
And we wanna work closely with the architect and make sure that we're not doing something that's going to just, be ripped out later. But there's been a couple of kind of stalls as far as what staff has been directed to do, because when the road project came in, we were like, oh, okay, well, don't go out and plant a bunch of plants in the medians, because they're probably gonna get tore up. And then now we have the architects coming in and going to redesign all of the roadway plantings, so staff had been directed to put it on hold again, because now we're dealing with this architect redesign. And so now we had decided at the last meeting, we would go ahead and take some of the money that we have and go out there and plant some plants, because we're still 2 years out at least.
Exactly.
Even on the backside of the architect design of what we're gonna do with the roadways, we still have what you had suggested. We have a whole revamp of the irrigation system to plan for the new plantings. So we're gonna be a ways out, so that's why we had decided last time that we would proceed and do some minimal planting, not go crazy, but do some minimal planting and try to see if we can't get the medians and the roadways looking better out there.
Proceed with caution.
Exactly.
You good? May we
Okay.
continue?
Okey dokey.
Okay. Next up is the landscape architectural services, and the 34,000 is the back end, or the second portion of that particular contract. Next up is utility fees, which is also contains some, I think, electric as well as the water that gets billed for this particular department. And then last up is insurance, which is an allocated portion. You'll see the insurance line in a lot of these different departments. It's an allocated portion of the entire annual premium.
What does that ensure?
General, auto, let me give you the rest of them.
Oh, another auto drives over, knocks down tree, yada, 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 they replace it?
Yeah, you have public officials insurance, liability, auto, and property.
Okay.
Okay, next up is waterway management services. And again, it starts with payroll lines. The real first non-payroll line item is engineering fees. That one we've kept at 35,000. It's actually an increase from your current budget by about 10. But when you look at where your run rate is right now, it's pretty close to your current run rate. Again, this is one of those lines that possibly we could decrease as we go. Attorney fees, kept that flat from budget to budget. Insurance again, fountain maintenance, we left that flat as well. That's really more of a kind of a just-in-case line item. Lake maintenance and wetlands maintenance, these are the two lines that have additional money in there related to the WCI turnover. And in particular, let's see, we put in, let me switch over to my details. I think it was,
Well, 124, 180.
we put in additional money into wetlands maintenance based on a proposal we received from Aquagenics to take over the additional conservation areas.
Which are?
From whom?
Oh, from who would be WCI, and I'm gonna need some help in terms of the actual
Let's defend that one.
Yes.
Hampton Park and
I noticed Dave Caldwell bailed.
I'm
and
sorry, I was missing the question.
yeah, the as part of that quote,
Yeah, I think it was
Hampton Park. Okay.
I think we need that clarified. I mean, somebody obviously gave this number. I didn't think Stephen just kind of pulled that number out of the sky.
Oh,
is that
no,
right?
no, staff provided the
I'm
quote.
defending you, so
Yeah.
hang in there.
I'll let you go there.
I'm simply saying, where did this come from?
Yeah, that's a $90,000 increase. And
No,
So,
you wouldn't happen to have that quote.
do you have a big wetland area in Hampton that you would preserve?
There are lakes and maintenance areas and.
there certainly are.
Yeah.
Isn't it 55 additional?
I'm not sure of the preserve areas,
Um,
where there's
Between
lakes there.
several
There are lakes,
locations.
lots of lakes.
See if I can, yes, I mean,
But that being said, we need to inspect every one of those things before we ever,
Absolutely, and
yeah.
that's one of those areas where staff is addressing an issue where WCI went and recorded documents indicating that we are responsible for maintenance, even though the plat says we are not responsible for maintenance of that surface water management system until the formal resolution by the board accepting it.
Correct.
So we've got another letter going out to WCI, yes.
Yeah, so even
Yeah.
if we take over ownership and maintenance of Hampton Park Lakes and Wetlands in fiscal 17, we shouldn't have a lot of first-year maintenance, would you think?
No, not
yeah.
provided that we
Well,
do.
it's
our
additional
due
areas of Hampton Park and Daniels Preserve. And the quote includes yeah, I just have the top level.
Yeah.
So 143.9 acres is the Daniels Preserve addition, and Hampton Park is 58.10. So basically, it goes from a current contract of 127 acres to a total of 329 acres that they will be maintaining.
And what is
Danny
that?
Took off on us too?
No, he's hiding.
Keeping exotics.
Where are you, Danny? So, can, so where are we with this Daniels Preserve situation from your point of view?
They, I believe earlier this year, the 5th year monitoring had been completed, so we're at this point simply waiting for the Water Management District to approve it. I think Elle has been out there. I personally haven't been out there, but until that sign-off is taking place and we agree with that sign-off, then, we won't be doing anything with
Do
that.
we
but-
have any conflicts with any of it at this time that?
No, I think it's come a long way. I think we'll be at that
Yeah.
point of accepting it. Hampton, Hampton Park,
Well,
maybe a
no.
little bit behind, but it'll be coming up.
All right, so then Hampton Park, until you've gone over there with Tyler and,
Yes, and they keep talking about it, but they've also been talking about Pelican Preserve for a number of years, so we'll
Exactly.
believe it when we see it.
exactly. Okay, thank you.
And basically for this wetland maintenance line item, before these increases, the amount was $51,180, and this incremental amount is $73,000 is what we're talking about. And it would be treated 3 times per year per area. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Next page, wetland plantings, we kept that flat. The wetlands preserve and lake inspections, we kept that flat. That is the inspection contract with Severn Trent. Aquascaping, we took out. Staff felt it was not needed and was a duplicate of the wetland plantings line.
It's not a duplicate, I clarified that, one's for lakes and one's for wetlands.
Okay.
But Elle and I discussed it, and she thinks that everything's gonna be status quo, and we can do without it.
Do without, okay, so we are keeping.
We're still good with 0 then for 17?
Yeah, we think
Okay.
so.
So we're not gonna be doing any lake plantings at all, anywhere?
I think it was on the wetlands.
We have wetlands plantings, which has got $10,000 in it.
But the aquascaping is lakes. So does that mean we're not gonna be doing any lake plantings? Is that what
Well,
you're saying?
you'll do it with the construction, wherever you do work, there'll be aquascaping there.
So is that budgeted with the
The
lake?
capital.
Okay.
It's part of the
that's-
project
That's what I
cost.
that's what I wanted to know.
Okay, next line is grass carp program. Left that flat. We left the compliance line item flat. Video inspection is flat. We have another repairs and maintenance line item in here. Kept that flat as well.
And is that repairs and maintenance of aerators, or what is that repair and maintenance of?
Yeah, it's the aerators. It's a small amount though. Let's see what. Miscellaneous repair. It just really is just miscellaneous repairs. It doesn't have to just be aerators.
Okay. And the reason that I'm asking that is I'm not sure how many lakes have aerators in the community, but I was asking Al about this because we do have aerators in Stony Brook that are in need of repair. And there's not enough money in the budget to do the repairs that are required in one community. So if we've got aerators in multiple communities, we're below budget, and the aerators are really important for the lakes. So I know we're planning on adding additional units, which is the $8,000, but we need to be maintaining what we've already got. And I think I'd like to have that looked at. I think that may need additional monies in it and I'd like to know how many aerators we've got in total, because there's a specific number that could be placed on repair and maintenance of each aerator.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have an inventory of aerators when they were installed and what a maintenance routine or life expectancy would be on those.
Right.
Yeah.
A CIP and inventory and listing of all the district assets, I think it's been on the radar for quite some time, and I believe currently that assignment is sitting on the utilities manager's desk. And I think
You can just go grab it.
I think Yvonne had started something, and it needs to be completed, but I mean, I have a whole list of things that we could add to that as far as knowing, and working on a replacement schedule, if we had that list, just like he said, as far as having, when we bought it, what is the life of this thing, because that information is imperative to a replacement schedule. But I don't think we have a complete list just yet.
We're about to sign an annual maintenance agreement for our areas in Pelican Reserve.
So by annual, so someone's gonna come out and inspect the aerators and do minimal repair instead of waiting until they break
And
down?
ongoing maintenance also.
Yeah.
And I believe part of that is part of the aquagenics contract, but they reach a point where they can't repair them anymore, and there needs to be replacement. And then that needs to be a line item in our budget that we can be replacing units that actually need replacement. Because otherwise, it languishes. And I don't even know what all of I know where the aerators are in Stony Brook, but I don't know where the aerators are in any of the other communities, and I'm sure we've got other communities with them. So,
And are there ones that need them, that don't have them?
Right,
That could be
exactly.
offsetting cost if they were in play.
so, I think, and I believe Elle probably knows where all the aerators are located.
I'm sure she does. She does have a nice spreadsheet that she has been compiling, and we've been working together on ways to expand that information that she has.
Because for the health of our lakes and for them to pass inspections, we're gonna be doing these, the testings for water quality. The aerators are real important for us to be maintaining and making sure that our lakes are turning over. So, really like for that line item to be looked at, do we need to increase replacement for our aerators?
Okay. And at some point, depending upon what type of program you were to put together for that, it might switch over into the capital plan.
Understand, thank you.
Okay, next up would be Parks and Recs. And again, starts with the payroll portion of the department. Then it has a small amount for attorney's fees in there. Utility services, which has been reduced in this department and increased in the swimming pool department. This is kind of a correction of when we first split out the departments in the current year, just to kind of adjust it a little bit. So that's why you have a reduction in the budget. And more insurance. Here's the second line item for the landscaping we talked about. There is a small amount for plant replacement program in this department as well. It's only $5,000. A small amount for the dog park. $30,000 for maintenance and repairs. And that kind of closes out.
And is that,
Parks.
the maintenance and repairs, is that just a swag or is it based
Yeah.
on?
It's I mean, because if you look at your trend here, it's all over the place. Back in 2015, there were some significant repairs done. It was up to 91,000. The budget this year was 30,000, and it's kind of been running pretty close to that, so we kept it there.
I mean, this has been an area of recent contention. I really think we need to do an inventory assessment, and really look at, you know, what we need to plan for. I mean, even with the lights going up, now we need to start saying, okay, in 10 years, 10, 15 years, we know we're gonna have to replace those again. But you know, just looking at the trend, at least, like I said, in this area, because it's been a hot topic, you know, I really think we need to have a little bit of rigor on here to say, what can we be doing to reduce that, or is it gonna be adequate over the next 12 to 24 months? I just want us to plan and forecast a little better.
Okay. Next up is the swimming pool. And again, first up is the payroll portion. There is an amount in here also for training and education, $4,200. That's a new line item we put in there. There's a small line item for attorney's fees.
If you said before that the plan was for a 3% salary increase. I just can't wrap my hands around something that went up $5,000, and that isn't quite, it doesn't correspond with 3%. And also, in addition to that, we've got most of the people that are at the swimming pool are part-time people. So why a $5,000 increase? See, or am I not reading this correctly?
Yeah, I'm not sure when you're saying a $5,000 increase.
65,532, 70,223.
Oh, that is just an allocation issue.
Okay.
We had the very first month when we did the splitting of the departments, there was an allocation issue for that.
All right.
I mean, really, it's just 3%, that's all.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see.
Then don't you have the 3% as a separate line?
Yes.
I mean, it's a separate line at the bottom, it's at the back, isn't it? The
It's
bottom.
within the staffing plan, it's a separate line within each department, so that it's not really attached to any position, but it does roll into their department. But yeah, there's a variance in there of $5,000, and that's
And
really,
that 3% is even for part-time people.
it's across the board right now.
Okay.
But again, it's not attached to positions per se, just departments.
Okey-doke.
So telephone budget in there, utility services, that's the one that kind of we took up a little bit. Insurance, repairs and maintenance, that one's 50,000, that's a big number. It's level from year to year, but it's a big number. Operating supplies, pool chemicals, and then you have the reduction in the propane and natural gas. We did not reduce it the full amount. We put a little bit of contingency in this 25,000 in case there's some delays or timing issues in terms of the transition.
Okay.
Okay, and where are we on that conversion? Do you have any idea?
For the gas line?
The
Yeah.
gas line.
engineer has been in here, they took the maps, and we're still trying to entertain the idea whether they're coming up Gateway or gonna go up the FPNL easement. And so I haven't got any feedback from them yet, because staff is incredibly worried about them coming up the right-of-way along Gateway Boulevard, because there's so many utilities there. So I will reach out to them and see if they are still trying to work on that income modeling that they do, or if they're going to try to divert the line into the FPNL easement based on the same funding that we've provided. So I will check on that to see where they're at, because I haven't heard from them in 2 weeks, I believe now.
Okay, thank you.
How about also the condition of the pool building and the bathrooms, which were 8 years ago were in horrible condition?
I wanna bring something to you on the capital side for that, definitely. I've been over there. There are several issues that we need to address there, and I think it's more of a major, building refurbish type of thing than just a standard repair and maintenance. I mean, one of the restrooms, the whole floor is like falling off of the building. We can't even open the door.
And we have a budget this year, actually, for some of that in the capital plan.
Okay.
That's why you're not
Can
seeing.
I make a suggestion then? When there are those things that are going to, in these various categories that are in the capital plan, even a simple asterisk,
Mhm.
you know, at the top heading will kind
Okay.
of trigger us to know that, kind of segue to that.
Well-
Just a suggestion.
Sure.
Is the, I know we removed the playground equipment a couple weeks ago, is, whatever we're planning to do with that area, is that covered under capital, or is it?
That's also gonna be in the capital program, because, so far, we've got a couple of estimates. That's gonna be a major deal on what we choose to put, as a playground there, whether we choose to do something like a wet zone and make it actually part of a pool activity. And that's also gonna be on the major
Okay,
capital
all right.
side.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, next page starts with the special events. And moving past the payroll line items, the special event line item is staying flat, as well as the holiday lighting and decoration, which is 15,000. And then there's a little bit of insurance, and that's really kind of it in terms of that particular department.
Do you have any quick idea of what special events, under special events, means?
That's the fishing tournament.
Yeah.
And the movie.
I'm sorry, the what?
Fishing tournament and the movie.
The fishing tournament and the movie.
Christmas was seen.
I thought and thought one night as to what those were, and I couldn't come up with them. Thank you.
We need to do a better job of those events then.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, next up is street lighting. You got electricity, which is being kept relatively flat. You have insurance, which does have an increase in it. Maintenance and repairs, this is one of the places where we have put a significant increase in there from the current year budget. This year, we only budgeted $15,000, and the maintenance repairs on that is projected to exceed 38,000. And staff expects it to be pretty significant next year as well. So we have increased this line to 35,000.
Stephen, we understood that FPL was raising their rates 10% next year.
Yes, it's in here. We put 10% into it. What's happened, when you look at the electricity so far this year, we've been under budget. So what we did is we took a 10% increase of our projected number, which in a lot of these cases left us pretty flat. But yeah, we did get it, just to kind of repeat that, we did get a notice from FP&L that their rates were going up, and we incorporated them into these numbers. Next up is roadway services. Maintenance and repair, we kept that flat. Street sweeping services, we did increase that based on the run rate to $15,000. The budget this year was $8,500. Operating supplies, engineering fees, and attorney fees really have no change, or just a kind of a small increase. But the really, for this department, this street sweeping services is the place that kind of went up. Everything else kind of kept flat.
Presumably, we are gonna turn over our major streets to Lee County, soon.
Mhm.
Does this roadway services include, any of those, streets, or roads that we're gonna be turning over, do you know?
I do not have that answer, although I believe when we talked about the street sweeping service line and that the turnover would not affect that particular line. So that was a question we talked about. But we can review that again.
That's a lot of sweeping for those roads and streets, but that's all right.
How many times a year is it?
Now,
The street sweeping is typically for the curbed roads, so the roads we're turning over wouldn't really impact.
Yeah.
The what roads?
Curbed.
Curbed.
for stormwater?
Stormwater.
Stormwater, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, and in fact, the NPDES report, we have to calculate how much stuff we pick up, I think, right, Danny?
Yeah, that's the official term is stuff.
is that spelled S-T?
Capital S.
STOUGH.
And how many street sweepings is that?
Oh, I couldn't tell you.
You don't know that off the top of your head? What are we paying you for?
30 a year.
Okay, next up is public safety. The contractual services with the sheriff's office, we reduced that from a $10,000 budget to $5,000 budget. Everything else in that particular department we kept flat.
On that, I see that we're way under budget this year, and I guess I'll address this to you. Since we're having issues at the fun park of people being there after hours, why aren't we utilizing our sheriff's budget to have them come in and try and clean up who's parking there late at night?
Well, and we've been trying to address that from the legal standpoint as whether or not that's a service we should have to be paying for, and we're still trying to get a handle.
That's correct. They're well aware of the issue and the situation, and the concern. I think for a while there was some confusion on the part of the sheriff's department as to the activities and their ability to go in on behalf, upon complaints, to go into the fun park. I think the ownership issue and the ability to enforce the laws is cleared up, and the question becomes, is that an extra patrol, or is that just part of the routine service? I think that's what April's been working with.
Do we have, first of all, do we have specific hours of operation? Secondly, if we did state specific hours of operation, are they enforceable?
I think right now, it's dawn to dusk, is my
Yes, it's
understanding.
dawn to dusk.
And it's signed,
Yes,
Correct.
okay? And the signs are in good condition,
yes, we have inspected the
not
sign.
missing like some things,
No.
et cetera. So therefore, the sheriff's patrol would have signage that would tell them, and it would become enforceable. I keep looking at Tony.
Yes, no, I think based on we've had different conversations with different people, but I think on the overall issue is they now recognize that they should be in there doing that, and they can be in there doing that, enforcing the law. It's just a matter of getting everything together now, because April had conversations with the deputy that actually engages in patrol. I had conversations with the legal counsel for the sheriff and the executive captain, who's basically second to my sheriff. And there was very good conversations that we had.
Good.
So I just need to they sent me some additional documents this week. I just need to get back with them, and I suggested April and I will then meet with them together. So we had the operation side, the legal side, and I can just bow out and have April take the rest of it.
Good.
Do we have lighting over there? in
Do
that
we have
area?
what?
Lighting.
No,
There's one at the fun park.
at the fun park?
There's one.
Like in the
It's,
park?
it's not a nighttime,
Yeah.
well, I mean, it's there's one.
But like the courts aren't lit.
No, the courts aren't lit, I mean,
playground,
it's not,
lit.
the light isn't there till light
It's probably just a safety.
at the night.
issue.
It's a light illumination, what do you?
The
Security, yeah. And that's by design.
I'm just trying to figure out if it would, what could we do, like, could we have security cameras?
Well, and I'm not even sure the security cameras would be, I mean, if you can't enforce it when it's happening, I believe the majority of the complaints are, I believe there's young people going over there. We've had several conversations, you know, with staff on what do you do about young people loitering after dark, you know, and I think Deputy Canfield might have been coming, back several weeks ago when I was speaking to him about it. I think he might have been coming just after 11, but the young people might have a 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock curfew, and they're gone by then. They're there late into the evening, but not in the wee morning hours. And of course, there's alcoholic beverage containers left, among other paraphernalia that's left behind. So we are trying to, within staff, deal with the trash issue and make sure that we're doing a full scope, you know, of the area, making sure we're checking the parking lot and the fields and the playground issue. And then we're also going to sit down and work with Mainscape because they're supposed to be checking the trash as well. And so we gotta get on the same page with that. But I don't know what the quick solution is, other than the neighbors, when they hear a disturbance out there, they need to be calling the sheriff's office. Because they really need to be addressing it while it's happening. You know, unless we just, like you had suggested, wanted to have a special detail where they're actually either parked at the park or actually going into the park, because I don't know if the officer, when he's patrolling the area and driving down Gateway, is actually pulling in to that little roadway there at the entrance and checking it routinely. I don't know if that's happening. So I don't know what the quick solution is without, you know, making a financial investment in something.
Okay.
Tony, are you gonna have something definite for us on this soon?
Hopefully by the next board meeting, and once again, get with April, see if we can coordinate a meeting with the operational folks at the SO.
Thank you.
We'll push it. Once again, they're very helpful, very cooperative, it was a very positive meeting when I met with them.
Sheriff's up for election in November. This is the time.
They didn't say anything about that, so I think it was good. And it was one of those issues that the Sheriff's Legal Counsel used to practice in Naples. He knows some attorneys in my firm. The one officer used to be a patrol officer for Cuyahoga County in my area where I live, and it was a very good, pleasant conversation.
Okay. Steve?
Okay, so next up is the debt service payments that we talked about earlier. That's about $320,000. That assumes the full $5 million in terms of the principal amount.
I don't know whether I'd say that that's conservative or liberal, but that seems like an awful lot for the
Well,
first year.
Oh, no, I don't disagree. I don't disagree that that's a lot.
Oh.
But what you're kind of showing here is the full amount, because they're gonna wanna see how you're gonna pay for this loan. And that's been part of the discussion, was basically they say, point to where in your budget you're showing principal and interest, because they're gonna wanna see it being covered. It's a little bit different being paid out of a general fund versus being paid out of a utility fund, where it's a lot easier because of the utility billings. Here, you only get one shot a year for your assessments. And if you can't show how you're gonna pay for it, then that's where the concern might come up when you start to put that money in.
It's more of a maximum exposure.
Yeah, because not only do you have to have the principal and interest, you've gotta have, I think it's 15% above it in terms of debt coverage. So,
They whack us coming and going.
well, and here's how I did this. I only put the principal and interest in there. The debt coverage is coming in the form of your transfer to your fixed asset reserve. So you're kind of utilizing it for both, which is next up. So that's why I got $150,000 in there. So it gives you extra coverage in terms of, for the loan, as well as, again, you're not gonna be using that money at the end of the year when you get transferred to the capital program. So that's why that's in there as well.
Say that again, at the end of the
Okay.
year, we're not using which,
The idea of the transfer is that it funds future capital.
okay,
But you have to have it in your general fund so that you can assess for it, otherwise you won't have the money.
understood.
if something were to happen during the year, the board is well within their rights to decide that they need to use some of that money for something else. It doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened. And then what happens normally is at the end of the year, I transfer that money into your capital program, and it increases that fund.
You're not suggesting that we use money that we told the state we were gonna do X with?
Oh, no,
And use
absolutely
it for
not.
Y.
No, no, no. The money that they want is the 320,000. That's their money. Yeah.
Okay, but aren't there also restrictions that we have to do with that money, what we said we were gonna do with it?
Oh, sure. The money they're going to give you, the $5 million, you've got to follow the program.
Okay.
This is complete, that's why this is a completely separate line outside of that program. It's for other capital projects. In addition, nothing to do with the lakes.
Oh, okay.
And that's the general fund budget, at least the preliminary draft. Is there any line items you wanted to talk about? Any other concerns in terms of where our starting point is?
I had a question on page 8.
Okay?
On page 8, if you go down on the left to natural resources supervisor, facilities maintenance supervisors, you've got quite a bit, like 22% of that charged to Pelican Preserve. I'm having trouble getting my head around that.
Yeah, that was really meant for the '04 fund.
That's,
Right here.
yeah.
Can you raise that?
Can you increase the magnification on that?
Sure.
Move the sheet up. Are we
There.
seeing it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
it's right there.
It's right,
Oh, okay.
right there.
Yeah, I mean, those percentages, we haven't really changed anything from prior years. That was, again, I don't know enough about this position to be able to tell you how it's being allocated, but that's kind of where, at the time, staff decided the percentage split was. And we can take a look at
I
that.
think we ought to take a look at that, please. You don't object to our taking a look at it?
Oh, if you didn't mention it, I was. so
Oh,
go
you
ahead.
were? Well, I'm sorry, I would have
No,
let you.
gosh, no. I think coming from a chairman position is more than just an assistant treasurer.
Did you get that?
I did.
Yeah,
I thought it was assistant
He's a-
secretary, that's okay.
he's giving us a needle.
Any other percentages that you'd like for us to kind of take a look at? And
Welcome to this quarter.
I didn't notice anything else.
Okay,
Okay, we've got other things on our agenda tonight. If you're finished with us for now, Steve?
if there are no more questions.
Thank
Not
you.
tonight.
Thank you so very much. We're gonna have a snort meeting 2 weeks from now on the Capitol.
Well, and what I'll do is I'm gonna leave the general fund budget in there with, and add the capital
Uh-huh.
to it, and then that way you'll be able to refer back and forth if we need to, and just kind of keep the discussions going.
Thank you so much.
Were there any suggestions that we made during this point that would want you to modify any of,
Well, that percentage would be one.
okay?
The asterisk, please don't
The-
forget the asterisk.
Don't forget your asterisk.
Well, you're gonna have both plans together next package, so
All right.
I'm gonna save that. Just as follow-up points, I think, we talked about the building, maintenance and repairs. That's a line item we're gonna take a look at. We talked about, we're taking a look at irrigation repairs.
Right.
Just
Can
in
we call
gen.
it, by the way, repair replacement?
I'm sorry?
Repair replacement?
Right.
Because I think that's really what I'm kind of referencing, the fact that there are sections that actually have reached their life limit, and we need to be replacing them.
Yeah, we'll go back through that. And really, all of the maintenance and repair lines I've circled as we
Okay.
go through here.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Thanks, Steve. Mr. Manager, you've got an item on 6C, Operations Manager positions. You want to update us, I think?
Yes, the
let me get back to the agenda. Operations manager, in order to buy some time and figure out exactly where you want to proceed from here, what we're recommending is to just go ahead and continue with April in the current role, which gives you several months to be able to figure out where you want to go with this position.
Okay, your report on the number of registered voters is
That's-
on here. What,
Mr. Chairman, if I recall, I think that the board took an action initially to, for the 90 days for April because
Right,
the contract
and
required.
the 90 days is coming up.
Right, and so I
So-
think it would be, for the record, it'd be helpful to have board action to
Mhm.
extend it for an additional period of time. Are you saying 60 days, 90 days, or?
I think 60 is a
Same
good
arrangement.
number.
You think
I'm thinking 90,
Yeah.
Well,
because that gives
let's
us.
just take it one step at a time.
Pam, you got a feeling? I'm thinking if he recommended 90, he maybe need 90. If he doesn't, we'll cut it off.
It'll be shortened, that's correct.
Before, with 90, but
So the
there's
board-
no sense in making things more difficult for us than they are already.
Then a motion would be in order for that, for that
Would you
period
make
of
a
time.
motion, Pam? She's Margaret, excuse me.
See that? You're just a token, Pam.
See what-
See how important you were?
When is the 90 days up? What, is it the end of this month?
May
The
8th, I
90
believe.
The first 90 days is, ends tomorrow.
May 8th, I thought, right?
May
yes.
8th.
May 8th? I thought it was May 5th.
The other
May 8th.
tomorrow.
I'll make a motion
Thank
to
you.
extend the contract for an additional 90 days.
Thank you, ma'am, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. I apologize. Any other discussion?
Yeah, so
Gee,
we're gonna
don't
go,
feel
we're gonna
sorry,
extend
don't
the operations manager position for 90 days. May, June, July, August. So in August, we're gonna need to come back and extend it again.
Not necessarily. The
I
board.
mean, if we,
Change the position.
if we so
Yeah.
choose, or, the purpose for this extension is to give the board and the management company and, I guess, April an opportunity to, and Tony, to hash through,
The organization,
okay.
yeah.
Actually, it's to create a staffing plan, which we never really have done.
Okay. All right.
That's technically correct.
Oh, it's adamantly correct, and it's about time that we finally get
I
it done.
agree with that.
I'd have a motion in a second. Any further conversation? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? 5-0, thank you. All right, do we need anything on this, management services number of voters?
No, action items, was there anything that you wanted from the workshop? I didn't remember anything coming out of that. So, the.
That was a
I'm
harsh
not
statement.
sure I like the way he said that, but that's right.
Well, if nothing else, I want to thank Tony for the pizza, for crying out loud.
Hey, yeah.
Mikhail for the
that's
soda
right.
and salad, so
I
thank
mean,
you.
that's the least we could do.
It was good, nice to know.
Right.
the pizza
No,
place
the,
around.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
the number of registered voters is strictly a FYI. It's required by Chapter 190 to do that.
It used to be more important during the earlier stages of a district, because that would trigger the election by qualified electors or registered voters. But now it's just a reporting issue.
Okay, we'll make that a matter of record and go on to item 7, staff reports, district council.
Nothing further to report other than I mentioned I will coordinate with April and the sheriff's department so we can keep that moving along and get some resolution of that and enforcement. Sunshine law and the public records law, I can have a conversation with Mr. Banks privately, or now basically you can't have any communications with any board members outside a noticed public meeting. That communication constitutes a meeting under the Sunshine Law. It can't be by email or text or telephone, and you cannot do that indirectly either. Someone can't come up to you and say, I was talking to Mr. Neubauer, and Mr. Neubauer told me that, he will. You have to tell them, no, you can't tell me what Mr. Neubauer told you. That's an indirect meeting or communication under the Sunshine Law. I always err on the side of caution dealing with the Sunshine Law, that if you think there's any possibility that you'd be running afoul of it, feel free to contact myself or Gail, and ask about the Sunshine Law. April's familiar with it. from her days with the Sterile Fire Rescue. But it's, you can't have, again, any meetings outside a noticed public meeting.
You'll learn to love it.
Yeah, I mean, I was on a HOA board of directors for many years, so I'm.
Yeah, this is more strict because there are civil and criminal penalties for violations.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And
I did
fines.
read through
And the papers love.
in preparation, I did read through this.
Yeah, the
actually.
papers love to take photographs of officials as they're being processed, I'll call it at times, for sunshine law violations, because that's their big, to do that. First Amendment Foundation that publishes the Sunshine Law Manual is funded by a number of newspapers and media outlets throughout the state.
Okay,
And
okay,
the second
okay.
component is public records law, real quick. Any materials you receive in the course of your role and part of your official functions as a supervisor constitute public records. And you have to maintain them, or you can give them to the manager to maintain, because people can make public records request of you, and then you need to comply with that public records request. And so it's easier if you get something, you know, make sure you retain it, or you give it to Cal or April for retention. It includes any communications, emails, text messages, all those are considered public records. And Cal or April will set you up with a district email account.
Okay.
And I would suggest that you ask everybody to use that district email account for all
Okay.
your communications involving the district.
Okay.
And again, any questions, please feel free, give me a holler. And the public records law is construed liberally, sort of the flip side of the sunshine law. And a good primer out there is the Sunshine Law Manual. It's on the Attorney General's website. It's a couple hundred pages, but it answers a lot of the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Are you
And that's
finished?
all. Yes, sir.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Mr. Engineer, are you still back there someplace?
Danny left. I
Oh,
had a question for him and
I'll go, yeah.
he's gone.
I'm not gonna let him off the hook.
He disappeared.
Mr. Manager, do you have anything?
Just a couple things. The utilities manager, we've broken it down. We're doing background checks on 9 candidates right now. And we'll start doing interviews within the next couple weeks. The utility billing manager, we are advertising. We've received 28 applications. Nothing real strong, but we do have 2 good candidates, one from the last search and another one that we received. And April and I will be interviewing those 2 people tomorrow, and just see if that's something that could be a quick fix, because they're both available right now.
And I think there was some discussion on whether that position is a manager. I mean, wasn't there some discussion on what the level of that position is, and whether it's, so as you're going through, have we determined that the level of expertise that you need to have is a manager level, or is it more administrative in nature?
I'd say it's both, because it does, the position does oversee 2 employees, and,
Yeah,
but
but
it
does
is
it need-
administrative, it's a working manager. You could call it supervisor.
And the reason why I'm asking is, I'm trying to understand what the functional expertise is for that role, and whether it needs to, fall under the utilities manager, or is it more administrative, and it should maybe look at, as you're doing your organizational review, should it fall under more an administrative branch and not be a manager level position?
That's where I had it in the organization. And we were hoping with the last employee that sat there that we would be able to grow that position because she had some additional talents that we were hoping to capitalize on in that new organizational structure. So I don't know where we're going to be with the current candidate selection.
Because the criticality now with Danny and team managing or overseeing the meter project, is that role as critical? Was it not the billing manager, who was overseeing the meter project? Utility manager, okay, all right. Yeah, I just wanna make sure we're hiring the right level. 'Cause I don't wanna have to, if we're having difficulty finding that right person, I just wanna make sure that you've evaluated and you feel like that is the right level.
I will be evaluating next week because I struggle with trying to.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Okay, where are we here? Oh yeah, he's back. Do you have anything for for us? Just say yes or no.
No.
Thank you.
I have a question for you now. Where are we on finding a vendor to clean out our sewer system? And where are we with the lakes and in our fund?
Okay, the sewer system, in fact, when you drove in today, if you came in on from Griffin from Gateway Boulevard, you would have actually seen the vendor who is doing the work associated with the roads portion of the cleaning. You're talking about stormwater, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that work is being done for the, so we have three portions of that. There was the road work, then there was Stony Brook and Silver Lake. So the immediate need was we need to get the road work portion done because of the turnover. So they are actually out there working as we speak. So that's where that one sits right now. The Stony Brook portion and the Silver Lakes will still need to come, but this at least we're taking care of the immediate need.
Will that be that same vendor?
I think that needs to be discussed. That vendor has been very, very cooperative. They came to us from Pelican Preserve, and
Give us a name.
it's Metower Environmental.
Right.
Excellent. They're very, very professional, doing a great job. But so I don't know. I mean, it's been out to bid twice.
Right.
So that is an option, but I think it's something to bring back to the board, once we get through this initial portion of it. So as far as the lakes go, there's two components to that. There's presently out to I say bid out to advertisement is for the selection of pre-qualified. So that is out on the streets now.
Okay.
In addition to it being advertised, we've reached out to, every vendor that we can think of that we believe is qualified. So, we're hopeful that we'll get some good vendors coming in. So then the next part of that is the actual moving forward with the lake bank restorations, which is what that pre-qualification is for. We have a draft design actually for those lakes that will be in that first round. So the next step is at the next meeting, we'll actually hold the public hearing for the facilities plan. The facilities plan will be needs to be adopted by resolution by the board, allow the public the opportunity to speak. That advertisement, the resolution, and the facilities plan will then go to DEP for approval. Once that's approved, then we can take those plans and send them to DEP to get their blessing to put out to bid. So everything will be falling into place once we get the bidders in for pre-qualification. We'll be reviewing those. We'll get a board approval on those list of vendors. We'll get DEP's approval to place that out to bid, and so everything will be falling into place so that hopefully as soon as the dry season hits, we'll be able to get those initial lakes worked on.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
It'd be nice to actually get a dry season where we get some work done.
Yeah, Mr. Governor, and a follow-up to that, Danny, the stormwater facilities plan will be in your next agenda packet. Have
Yes.
Comments by staff.
Yes, I'm not sure how it'll get in there because it's a large file, so we'll have to figure that part out. Probably have to have a link that each board member will be able to download that.
You gave us one several weeks ago.
Yes, that it will likely be the same. That was a draft, so if you have any comments between now and then, I guess they would give the comments to Cal or
Bring them to the board meeting for that.
okay. Well, no, what I was thinking though is because that'd be fine.
If there's
That'd be fine.
pages that change, couldn't you just send us the replacement pages?
Yeah,
Assuming you have the pages numbered.
the pages are numbered, yes. But if you have any comments you want to bring to that, we can also still go through the adoption process by resolution and make those changes at the meeting. That won't be an issue.
How many pages is this?
100 when you consider the
How about the
appendices.
summary version?
I think the.
How about
Two.
the cliff notes?
I think it's about 20 pages more of text, the rest a lot of graphics. and other
Right, the
materials.
text is not that, yeah, the graphics are a lot,
So
so,
the summary version would be really nice.
yeah, like,
I had to go get new ink for my printer after.
Yeah,
I
this
was-
is one of the
Yeah,
pages,
yeah.
so yeah, so you need a lot of ink.
like 2 pages on
Summary
executive
version.
summary.
The summary's it's about 20 pages really, and it's pretty concise.
Right, it's to the point.
Cliff notes,
The
thank you.
financing plan's also part of that,
Cliff
right?
notes.
Yes, the financing plan is a portion of that, and that's several pages long. Exactly how many.
Anything else for Danny? Thank you, sir.
I think it's the graphics even.
Okay, what do we have, financial report? Stephen, is there anything in the March report that I missed that we should talk about?
I think the best comment I could say is that assessments is about 96% collected, which is good.
96 through the end of March, is that a good number?
That's a good number.
Okay.
And I believe the advertisement for the tax certificate sales was first in the paper yesterday, I believe.
And you'll get another chunk of money when those come through.
Anything for Danny, or for Steve on the financials? Okay, last thing is supervisor comments. Gary? Ann?
I just wanted to know, Al, do you have a orientation packet for new supervisors?
We do, I can put something together.
Okay,
That would be great to help Mr. Banks too.
thank you.
Margaret?
I have nothing.
Okay, Doug, your chance. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, I appreciate the vote of confidence for putting me in the chair today, and I look forward to working with the board to get things done.
That's terrific. We're
Welcome
certainly
aboard.
Thank you.
Looking forward to working with you, and gentlemen, ladies, we are adjourned.
So funny how I was looking down there.
Oh, looking at Al.
Now you're getting diggy, diggy, everything.
Here's my world.
I love one.